Good. So we're going to see more people enter. So please be patient as they do. But we can't dally too much, and you'll get a sense of why as we get moving. And I'm going to try to speed through some of this as we go forward. I just need to get comfortable with what I am doing to now share my screen on my desktop. Okay, and let me share this in. Okay, so we are now recording, we are live, and we can move forward. So welcome everybody. I am going to ask you, before we do anything else, to contribute to the conversation a little bit. There are people based on the registration that are from all over the world. So that's amazing. Eventbrite has actually helped in that way, I believe. So some direct people. So I'm going to ask you to contribute in the chat box. So hopefully all of you know Zoom well enough. I'm not going to walk you through a tutorial of Zoom. We don't have time. But if you could just in the chat box, put in your name, your location, and an assumption that you make regularly. So you may have to think about it for a second. But start to put in your name, your location, and what assumption do you tend to find yourself, you catch yourself making an assumption? What is that assumption? Is it about people, about yourself, about the world? What assumption do you find that you make? Tomorrow will come no matter what. That is, I mean, that is a great assumption. Zoom works always. Nice one. That people are trustworthy. Good. Everyone is good until proven wrong. Innocent until proven guilty. Thank you, Peter. People make irrational decisions most of the time. Anna, welcome. People are resilient. All right, Larry, people who don't understand what I'm saying need more facts. That's an interesting assumption. Great, Robert's assumption is that most of people do not have a systems thinking approach to seeing problems and solutions. Okay, David is that people are good. Marissa, everyone knows or has an innovation mindset. Tara, that people don't recognize the extraordinary differences in people's reality. Okay, and people always choose, that there's a conscious choice. It sounds like perennial. Great. Bernard, welcome. People can change with time. Other people say people don't change, right? Another assumption that people make. And then we all have an inner wisdom we can draw from. Excellent, good. So I want to get you just reflecting a little bit, right? Reflection is really important when we think about mental models. So just want to get you a little bit in the zone, but we don't have much time. So I am going to fly through some of this pretty quickly. I am going to stop for questions at one point, but then we're going to get into some activities today. So let's just briefly give you an overview of why we're here to some extent. So what's brought us here. So if you'd like more information on Seoul, Singapore, please go to the website. You can find out more information on events as well as on membership. But we have been running some webinars and workshops in the past. So you'll see on the left some of the past guest webinars we've had, from David Peter Stroh to Umberto Maturana, who is a biologist and systems thinker, as well as Fritjof Capra, most recently, who is a physicist and ecologist, professor, and prolific author. But we're also running these organizational learning workshop series based on Peter Senge's 5 disciplines. So he wrote the book, The Fifth Discipline, with others back in the early 90s. And it has been a mainstay of management and leadership thinking. So we thought that we would go through and provide some why is it not going forward? Provide some information. So we did a systems thinking workshop. Robert Steele, who's here, and Peter Senge helped us go through some of the idea of understanding on systems thinking. Today is about mental models. We're going to have another workshop on personal mastery. That'll be on the 3rd of October. You'll find out more information at the end of this webinar, but if you would like to go ahead and use that QR code below to register now using your phone, you can do that. So that's optional for you as well. Shared vision will be another one, and the last one is team learning. So that's basically the webinars and workshops that we have had, the past ones and the ones that we've had and the ones that are coming up in terms of workshops. Okay, so that was just a brief introduction. So life is empty and meaningless. So I asked you for your assumptions. So it's quite interesting to see many of you. Interesting. How do I get to, I have a poll to ask you. I don't know how to, oh man, how do I get to the, this is quite interesting. Okay, so I'm a neophyte as it relates to polls using Zoom, but I want to ask you guys this question, and I am supposedly not able to do this. So let me stop here. I'm going to ask you a poll. This question. I'll launch this poll for you here and ask for you to vote. What do you think about that statement, that life is empty and meaningless? It's one of, how might you respond to that? Do you agree? Yes, it is empty and meaningless. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Absolutely not. Is anybody voting? Can anybody vote? Can you vote on, is there a poll for you? Can somebody respond for me real quick? Just let me know. Have you seen a poll?
Yes, we have seen the poll and we have voted.
You're voting?
Yes.
Okay, because it's telling me that nobody's voted so far. Okay.
No, I voted too.
Okay, thank you very much.
I voted, yeah.
Okay, good. So I don't know why it's telling me it's not, that nobody has voted.
Refresh your screen.
That's interesting.
Or do you need to close the poll?
I did close the poll. It just says 0 voted.
You want to try again?
Okay, try that again. If you guys don't mind voting again, that would be wonderful.
Done.
That's interesting. Why is it not telling me that? All right, let me see if I can, if I share the results.
Ah, there it is.
Yeah, there it is.
What do you see?
The poll results.
7%. Absolutely not. It's full of inherent meaning.
Because I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it actually.
Yeah,
It's quite funny.
67% is absolutely not. 14, yes, it's empty and meaningless. 14% is maybe it is, maybe it isn't, not sure. And then 5% is WTF.
Come on, Robert. Go ahead and say the words. Okay. So, excellent. Thank you. So let me back out of that for the moment and get back into sharing my screen and what I'm trying to do here. Okay. So the idea here was to get you guys thinking about this concept, because this in itself is a mental model, right? That life is empty and meaningless. You saw this with some of the assumptions that were being stated earlier. It's kind of similar, right? The corollary to this is that, and we are meaning-making machines, right? So what does that mean when somebody says life is empty and meaningless? But then what does the corollary mean? This, in a sense, is a statement that is a mental model about mental models, right? If life is empty and meaningless is a mental model, we are meaning-making machines is one. And this goes to the heart of what mental models is, and we'll be exploring that. This comes from Landmark Forum, and something that sort of, I think, shifts a lot of people's framings of what's going on in their lives, right? In terms of how do they interpret what's happening. And if that we provide meaning to things that happen on our own, then it fundamentally changes our ideas of how we can understand mental models in our lives. So just a bit of an introduction to that. Okay. So today we're going to be covering a bit of the introduction to mental models, talking about mental models and sharing them with each other. So you'll go into breakout groups, and then we'll have a larger, more significant project in a breakout group to really explore some of the issues in mental models around the sustainable development goals that we have. So this is going to be a full-packed hour and a half. In fact, I'm going to ask you a little bit later if we can go over to see who's willing and able to go past the hour and a half time frame, because there is so much packed in today. I don't want to talk at you too long, but I want to introduce to you the models and mental models frame. So a model, all right, let's step back a little bit and think about models. A model is an abstraction, right? It's something that we put forward to provide some understanding of reality, but it is not reality because we only have a certain amount of information, right? And so even the framing of a system, when we think about causal loop diagrams or systems mapping, right? We put that forward as an abstraction because, well, that's what we have, that's what we know. But it isn't the actual system. And yet, as it relates to how we operate in the world, we often convince ourselves that it is reality, right? It is ultimately, though, a model is a representation of just a mental model. So our mental models that we have, we put down in the frame of what in the frame of a model, right? So on paper or in a screen, right? In a PowerPoint. Many of you can think about some of the models that you've seen. If you're in the frame of really anything, right? That we use models to communicate ideas and understandings. So if we think about a tree, right? We see a tree. That's the reality to us. But in actual reality, that is just a model. It is a mental model that we have of a system at play. But because we only have a certain amount of information, right, it is not the actual reality. Hope that makes sense. George Bach says, essentially all models are wrong. And that's kind of what I'm getting to, right? But some are useful. Some are useful. And they are wrong because they are simplifications. But they can be useful because we can learn from them. So if we think about how we represent things again in the causal loop diagram, we can see that these are actually just representations of how we perceive. So this is a causal loop diagram of mental models. Thank you to Robert for pointing this out to me. Okay, I don't want you to work through that. You don't need to worry about the cause and effect relationships there, but just recognize that we create mental models about mental models, right? We create models to describe mental models. Good. So what is another common historical model that we have had, one that we can compare, right? There are vast and there are many. One of the ones that I can think of in significance, oh wait, sorry, we're not even there yet. I changed the slides around. So this is how we can describe a mental model, right? So here, this description, I pulled off of Wikipedia. A mental model is an explanation of someone's thought process about how something works in the real world. It is a representation of the surrounding world, the relationships between its parts, and a person's intuitive perception about his or her own acts and their consequences. Okay, so that is a description of that. So we think about the Earth. What is a mental model historically that we have had about the Earth? Anyone want to jump in?
That we're the center of the universe.
Okay, so there's one, that we're the center of the universe, a geocentric model. What else?
The Earth is flat. The Earth is flat.
The Earth is flat, isn't it? How do you know that it's not?
Yeah, I mean, there was a shift, obviously, like prior to Copernicus, the world was thought as the center of everything, the sun, everything revolved around it. And it was after Galileo and Copernicus that blew that away, right? Not overnight, but
no.
Yeah.
So Ptolemy from the Roman, right? So a philosopher in the Roman Empire from about 100 AD had that sort of notion that the Earth was the center of the universe. And that carried on until basically the 1500s, right? 1500s. And the Earth was flat until what happened? This was the common mental model. The Earth was flat until?
Christopher Columbus sailed off the side of it.
1492, Christopher Columbus just dipped off the edge of it. Magellan sailed around the whole of it.
Vasquez, Magellan, yeah.
Right, so these are the mental models, and it takes some time even after that, right? So even after Copernicus and Galileo, right, it took some time.
Yeah, the same, if I may, like for plate tectonics, coming from a geology perspective. That was before it was seen that the Earth didn't move, but Alfred Wegener introduced plate tectonics. But he was not a geologist, so he was rejected for almost 100 years. But his passion was geology. Yeah.
But the more information that we get, then slowly, potentially, the mental models shift. And yet, mental models are a way for us to be able to operate in an efficient way with the reality, right? So, and to help us deal with things and efficiently use our energy. How do we do that from a neuroscience perspective? We use models. So this gets to the geocentric framing. Good. So how does a mental model work? Well, this is a model. So in a sense, a mental model about mental models. This is from Chris Ardress, as represented in the Fifth Discipline field book. And so many of you have seen this. Anybody know what this is called? The ladder of inference, it says it there. So the ladder of inference provides an opportunity for us to examine a little bit of how we interpret and infer what happens in our day-to-day, in our realities. So this is not just about looking at the big scheme of things in terms of the Earth being flat or the center of the universe. This is about our own day-to-day operations. Okay. So it starts with the data, right? That there is observable data and experiences. Right? So we record data in our head from what we see, but we select the data that we see because we can't bring in all the data that's out there. And from that, we add meanings. Right, that come from both our cultural experience and our personal experiences. And this goes back to we are meaning-making machines, right? So we select the data and we provide meanings to that selective data that we've been able to gather. And then we make assumptions based on those meanings. And from those assumptions, we draw conclusions, right? And then we adopt beliefs or further the beliefs we've already had. And from that, we take actions based on those beliefs. And because of those actions, they cement further within our belief systems, right? And so then we have a reflexive loop that affects, again, the data that we select. And you might have heard of this as a confirmation bias, right? So this is how the mental models work. And you can imagine in terms of the flat Earth, right? What does that look like? In terms of how people operate, how that stayed in for, over 1,500 years and 1,600 years in terms of how we observed and thought about the Earth. That just continued to be confirmation bias, because to us, as we look, the data that we have is what's in front of us, right? And that is that the Earth in front of us is flat. Okay. Any thoughts to add to that or questions?
Yeah, actually. I mean, all religious models are mental models, all religious philosophies. And Noah Yuval Harari makes the point in 21 Lessons for the 21st Century that indeed we want to kill people and kill ourselves for our mental models. And that's something we might begin to reflect on.
Yeah. So we take action and we hold on to our mental models because of how they've been structured in our lives, right? The meaning that they have in our lives, and that drives our behavior. Right? So it's not just about these big things. It's about how we engage socially together. And in fact, what I was hoping to say earlier was that we are especially bad at our mental models being accurate the more complex the reality is. Right? So we as humans aren't very good at grasping the complexity, and so our mental models tend to be even more incorrect. And so in the human social systems, which are very complex and dynamic, we make assumptions. We have mental models that are often very, very wrong. So obviously it's not just the Earth, but it is in the social system, right? So here is a mental model that somebody that you might recognize from this cartoon might have, right? It's the idea that that person themselves is victimized, right? No politician was ever treated so badly, right? It's a bit of hypocrisy, a bit of humor, yet obviously not very funny given the reality that we're, at least in our estimation, the reality that we're facing. But think about some of the others, right, that have been out there. What are some of the positive mental models, right? this versus somebody like, let's say, a Muhammad Ali, right? What sort of mental model did a Muhammad Ali have? And how did they interpret what transpired? Or Bruce Lee, or some of the other famous people that were very resilient in their lives. You know, what sort of mental models did they have? Okay, so we all have mental models in our lives, and that's kind of where I wanted to go with that assumption question at the beginning when you guys first logged on. What assumptions have you made? Because that a lot of times will point to, if you work down the ladder towards obviously the meanings that you put into it, and looking at over entirety, what is your mental model? How would you describe that mental model? Okay, so what I'm going to ask for you to do is to get into some breakout rooms and have a bit of a conversation that's going to be based on a misunderstanding or disagreement that you've had with somebody. Perhaps you made an assumption. And I'm going to ask for you first to reflect on that, because the real keys about mental models and awareness of mental models is reflection and inquiry. So we're going to do this first as a bit of a warm up, and then we're going to have a bigger activity and soon afterwards. What I'm going to do is to actually, I guess I didn't make Peter the host yet. So, but use the ladder of inference. You might want to take a picture of this and consider some of the meanings that you've added as part of that model. So what different meanings can you assert to the data that you have selected, right? What different meanings have you asserted to the data? It's more likely the statement I want to have. So if you could take a picture of this, if you don't know the ladder of inference by heart, please do. And I'm going to break all of you up into pairs. In reality, see if I can. This is interesting. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Hopefully you've taken a picture, and I have 23 of you. I'm going to send you into actually 10 different rooms to engage together, and you're going to have 10 minutes for this discussion. And actually, before I do that, I want to get into a poll. So here's another poll. Let's try it again, shall we? So this poll is about, because this next activity that we're going to do is actually going to bring you into Miro, and it's going to have you into breakout rooms, engaging together in a little bit more of a intense and deep conversation. So we may run over a little bit, because all we have right now are essentially 50 minutes between now and the official end. So I'm going to ask to see how many of you can stay just 30 minutes longer if we need to finish latest by 1 p.m. Singapore time. And why do I not get in?
Excuse me, I have 11:39. What time do you have?
11:39, yes. So it's 50 minutes is going to be at 12:30. So I'm asking if we can stay 30 minutes longer to finish by 1 p.m. The official time is the 12:30 finish for this.
That would be 40 minutes from now.
Sorry, 50 minutes from now.
50, yeah. Am I missing something?
I'm asking to see if people can stay 30 minutes longer after 12:30, so by 1 p.m. And again, I'm not seeing, I don't know why, I'm not seeing the poll results. So can somebody please read out to me what we're seeing? Or you probably don't see it.
Yeah, it's not showing.
Okay, let me share the results and then you can tell me.
65% can, 30% cannot. and 5% are depends.
Okay, or maybe it's maybe already asleep. Okay, so good, so thank you. So let's see what we can do. And for those that have to leave, I understand, and if you can stay, that would be great, but let's see how we do. And for those 5% of you who want to see how you're feeling about it, let's see how we go. Good. Okay, so let me share my screen again and can move forward with a bit of an introduction as to the next steps. Now I'm going to ask Peter. Peter, are you still with us? Peter? Peter Senge?
I'm here.
You did. Okay, I see you've just shared it. Thank you.
Just post out the Miro link. You can
Yes.
click onto the Miro link.
Okay, before you do that, I want to introduce something to you. For those of you that are not familiar with the famous iceberg model of systems, it's essentially a representation to recognize that, you know, the mental models that we have are not just at individual levels, right? We have mental models that are commonly held, and they have an impact. They have an impact just as the ones we do personally have an impact on our behavior, as you've just seen with the ladder of inference, right? The mental models that we have more collectively in society have an impact on what transpires in terms of events. And so if we look at it from an iceberg model, we might have a mental model of different things, right? So economic mental models, our relationship with nature, our relationship in terms of countries. So those are all mental models that we have and we hold, just in the same way that we did with the ladder of inference. And that essentially creates the types of systemic structures, that is the systems that we don't see. So we're talking about IT systems, but the social systems and the governmental systems and the economic systems that we have, those are structures that are created essentially from our mental models that we've helped to support. And because of those structures in existence, they create the different patterns of events that happen, right? And we can see that over on behavior over time graphs. But what we actually see and what we observe, and we actually don't often make the connection to see the patterns on our own, are the actual events. Right, so I just want to bring that forward so you can think about some potentially in this next exercise, some of the events that you've potentially observed and understanding sort of what are some of the structures and the mental models that take place. Any quick questions on this? None. Okay, good. So the Sustainable Development Goals you're familiar with are systemic challenges in themselves, right? They all have, they're broad areas, but they all have within them systemic challenges. And so what we're going to be doing is engaging you guys to look at some of these really big, hairy, persistent, nagging problems, but from different perspectives. So let me introduce it to you. It's going to be called Playing the Wheel. Somebody may need to mute themselves. I'm getting a lot of beeping. Let me see if I can find out who that is. Okay. Playing the Wheel in Miro. So we're going to be doing that. And your breakout rooms that you're going to be assigned to randomly are going to be essentially, you're going to bring into one of these 8.
I think it's 3 o'clock.
Let me see if I can find.
3 o'clock, Suchi.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're listening in on somebody's conversation. Apologies for that.
Yes.
So what we're going to be doing is breaking out into these breakout rooms. And so go to in Miro. If you don't know how to use Miro, obviously please let me know and I can try to help you. But the breakout room will coincide with the Miro room that you're going to go into. And then you're going to be able to have a discussion with your group using this based on what's there. So the instructions really quick. Let me introduce you to these instructions. Okay, so first is that essentially this wheel is going to be filled up with the different stakeholders that you yourselves are going to come up with. You're going to have your own initials that you're going to place in front of a stakeholder's name, and that's going to be the stakeholder that you are going to essentially play the part of for a very brief period of time. And in that period of time, you are going to draft up on these Post-its, the pink and yellow or gold Post-its that you see, you're going to draft up after putting the stakeholder's name at the top, both problem from the stakeholder's perspective, what is the problem, as well as the ideas for leverage, right? So where might some of the solutions and change come from that perspective, right? Here in this case, it's about zero hunger. So your goal as a group is first going to be, before you even go there, is to have a conversation around a single sole problem that you're going to focus in on, because you can't just look at zero hunger as the problem, because there's a specific issue within that you can look to decide that that's what you're going to address. And when you do that, you're going to put that in the center where it says basically problem. Now, I know that this is a lot of instructions so far. Don't worry, there's instructions at each of those rooms, but I want to run them through with you. I want to run through them with you really quickly. So the first step is going to be to write your initials on the Post-it note and place it near the circle. Then you're going to, as a group, discuss the SDG card that's in the upper right-hand corner and choose one real challenging, long-standing, or sticky problem within that SDG, right? So if it's quality education, for instance, who's going to pay for it? How do we finance it? And then you're going to write that on the Post-it, the center of that circle. You're going to have 5 minutes to do that. Then you're going to agree to approximately 6 to 8 stakeholders for that problem. So who are some of the stakeholders that are involved in that? And write them on the flip chart that was on the top left of the room, right? And then write them into the slots in the circle where it says stakeholders, okay? So you're going to have 5 minutes to do that as well. So this is the start. So again, this is what that looks like, right? The problem goes in the center, the stakeholder's name goes in that circle, and the pieces of the pie, rather, your initials go into where it is, and you will be changing on a clockwise basis after every 3 minutes. So let me run through with you the next steps. It is to allocate yourselves so that one person is at each stakeholder and post your name there. For the next 3 minutes, you're going to be that stakeholder. And again, as I said earlier, you're going to write the current problem concerns as well as potential ideas for leverage into solutions. After 3 minutes are up, you're going to have basically to rotate clockwise from that place, so to the next stakeholder. So if there's not a stakeholder in the next one, if you don't have a stakeholder next slot, then go to where there is a stakeholder. And then repeat that next process of considering the current problem concerns and ideas for leverage, adding to what's already there in that Post-it. So you're going to have essentially 5 or 4 or 5 times at this. I will let you know when your time is up after all of that, but you need to self-monitor a little bit as to the 3 minutes. Any questions so far?
Yeah, so the center problem is essentially the goal, the SDG goal.
So it's a focus of that's within that SDG. So again, if it's education, right, it's the funding issue, right? Who is going to pay for it? Who's paying for the education is part of that SDG issue, because the entire SDG of quality education is just too big.
Mm-hmm.
There's really no definition to it, and it would be a very difficult conversation to have, especially in a short time.
So do we have to go to this link that Peter is posting, or we just stay?
Correct. Yes. So I'm going to break you off into rooms, but you also need to go to that link. So you'll have your Zoom open. So you'll be in a breakout room in Zoom, but you will also be on the website, right? So if you go to your internet browser, where you basically use that link that he's provided, you will be inserted into that frame. So you'll just have to zoom in and go to whichever breakout, or rather Miro room, let's call it, that corresponds with your breakout room number. So if you're in breakout room 1, then you'll go to that Zoom room 1 or the Miro room 1. Make sense?
How do we know where we are?
It will show you. So if I go back, you'll see that here, it says breakout room 2. Make sense? So when you go into Miro, you will be given essentially the same. You'll see this, basically.
Garrett?
Yes.
Maybe I do a quick rundown with everybody. I think there are questions here. Yeah.
No, and I'm answering them, Peter. But yeah.
How do we get the?
Can I ask?
Sure.
Because shrinking from 100% down is quite important. Because when you open, it's at 100%, so people.
So maybe allow me to share and do a quick sharing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to share right now?
Yeah, share screen so that everybody knows there's some question in the room. Yeah.
Are we in Miro or are we supposed to go back out of Miro right now?
So you are not in Miro right now.
Oh, I am.
Okay, so some of you may already be, which is fine. So if you are, that's fine. And what I'll do is I will send you and allocate you to breakout rooms so that you will see what breakout room you're to be in.
With the SDGs, how do we know which part of the SDG we're looking at? As you said, it's huge, right?
So you're going to discuss that.
To look at, okay.
Yeah, you're going to discuss
so that's
that.
what to discuss within the rooms, yeah?
Yes, correct.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So any questions before I send you guys off into the breakout rooms? Other questions? No?
I'm sure it'll become clear when we get in there.
Yes.
Down to
Yeah.
Learn by doing.
Yeah.
Peter wanted to share something.
Peter, I've enabled you to do that.
Now I got it. Yeah. Okay. So very quickly, once you are in Miro, in this page, can you see? Go to the bottom, put it to the lowest percentage. You can see the whole screen here. And the numbering, if you look at the screen right now, on the left, on the top is 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you go down 5, 6, 7, 8, the room. So you are located room 1, you're on here. Room 2, you're here. Room 3, you're here. Room 4, you're here. All right?
How do you get the size down again, Peter? I didn't follow that. Where do we hit to get the
Go
size?
to the bottom right-hand corner. There's a zoom out, zoom in sign. Make sure you are at the lowest percentage so they can see the whole picture. And then you go
inside the Miro room. That's okay.
Now, assuming I'm room 3 here, okay, now I know where I am, room 3, I just go a bit bigger. All right, how do you move? You see, you click on this arrow here, all right? If it's a palm size, a palm, you can move the page, all right? So this is room 7, I move up, I'm in room 3 now. So this is room 3, and I make it bigger again by making it bigger, and I shift it again. To move any sticker notes, you click on the arrow. Once you get arrow signs, you can move on sticker notes like that and do all your typing, all right? So these are the 3 steps you need to know. The rest, you didn't have to bother about the features.
Yeah, so I've already put the sticker notes there, so you really don't need to bother with the extra sticky notes.
Okay.
So you can just go in and add to the flip charts that are already there, so the pink and the gold ones, and the text will minimize as you're typing more into it, and you can put numbers or whatever you like.
So in other words, we're writing everything down, we're not talking. There's no dialogue, is that?
There is dialogue as you discuss which ones you're going to do. So if you follow the steps that are there, that are written out for you, which was basically to have a conversation around what the SDG, specifically narrowly focused issue or problem is that you're addressing within the SDG, what's the dilemma, and then the number of stakeholders. So what sort of stakeholders you're going to have that you're going to agree to. So that's via discussion. Okay.
Okay, learn by doing.
Learn by doing. So let's try it out. I appreciate you guys playing with it. And let me then now send you to all of these. It's going to be 6 to 7 participants per room, or 6 participants per room. There you go. Maria, can you join? So welcome everybody. Welcome back as you log in. I'm going to, we're going to take an opportunity to hear from each group, recognizing that we're over a little bit, but I appreciate your patience, which is why I asked up front. I knew we would be. And also I recognize that this is a challenging thing for Miro, for a lot of people, and even myself, trying to get it set up and make it work. And, you know, how this flows in my head, how I envisage it, obviously does not necessarily pan out to be reality. Thus, I have a mental model of simplicity around this. So thank you for your patience with that. But let's hear from each group. I'm going to go ahead and just jump into the rooms. So here we're in breakout room 1. So group 1, we'd love to hear from you in terms of what came out of that last question for you. So this last question around how has the thinking about some of these challenges limit our capacity to resolve them, as well as what sort of opportunities are you seeing from hearing from the different stakeholders? So if you can walk us through what your specific problem was and a little bit about what came out of it. Who was in group 1?
Ming, Maria, Marissa, Lin, Sean, you'd like to share?
Okay, I'll start. So we broke it down and kind of focused more on alleviating poverty in women, because obviously they're a group who often suffer the kind of impact of the entrenched attitudes and beliefs around women in the home and things like that. So, and their role within society as sort of caretakers and homemakers. So some of the stakeholders we had, like the environment, local community groups, their family members, NGOs. Those are some of the stakeholders that we identified, the environment, for example. And through that, we then kind of thought about those stakeholders and the impacts or the kind of effects that were imposed upon them, and then came up with some of the ideas. So some ideas were women as environmental stewards, because that would give them, so that it proves that kind of women are better at kind of caretaking to some extent and nurturing. So finding work and creating an industry that was more women friendly in environmental stewardship. Another aspect was thinking about local communities and the support that they got from the local communities, and changing the kind of attitudes and beliefs around women as just solely homemakers and caretakers there. What else did we talk about? Does anyone else want to share from group 1? Peter? I think Peter was quite vocal.
I think we talk as, sorry, I'm not Peter. I was going to say we talk about the ideas the community have towards people who want to help, or organizations that want to help, and also prejudice from one another as well, apart from lack of funding. Not only for NGOs, but also for other organization groups, local groups that want to help as well, and the lack of resources or knowledge about the community itself. And I think there were more comments towards the end, and I'm sure I'm missing something. I think that was Peter, actually.
Yeah, we didn't quite finish the member, but I would like to answer the question is that I think as a mental model, we can see that each of us in the stakeholders have their own view. When we rotate the views, we take on a different posture. So it's not easy to take on that role. I start with family members. As I take on the other role, I tend to question the other way around. As a family member, I wanted help, I wanted money, I wanted resource. But then as a community, I'm asking, why should I give this family? So there's a bit of this kind of tension in the mind. Yeah. Okay, over to you, Garrett.
Thank you.
Sorry, Garrett, maybe I just share. I just want to share some of my personal experience of going through this. What I was doing through this is more to me like a brainstorming process. We just follow the steps that's guided by you and collective as a team. Peter was there facilitating, and and then we're just going through, to me, just more like a brainstorming going through. So then I forget about the mental model altogether, and how I'm going to use it in this. So I got some struggle of seeing the link between the two. It's like without a mental model, we still go through this process of working out through. So that's my personal feeling.
And I think one of the challenges here is, and thank you for that, I think one of the challenges here is that this is done virtually, and it's hard given the time constraints to really engage in the stakeholders' mindset. And that's the idea, is to really think from the stakeholders' perspective about the problems and from their mental models, right? So really trying to embed, and I think because this is so short timed, it sounded like a good idea to me to do this, and I think it's an interesting activity, but you're right. I mean, under these circumstances, I think it's kind of hard. Where's the mental model piece in this? And I think it's inherent in the really embracing and becoming the stakeholder. So as that stakeholder, if you come from their perspective, and I should have framed it a little bit more deeply in terms of like the emotions, the experiences, everything that make them who they are, what things would you identify as being some of the problem issues and potential levers for solutions? What would you look to, even if they're not right, even if they're wrong, even if you know they're wrong, but from that stakeholder's perspective, what might they be? And that's about identifying and understanding what different mental models of the different stakeholders. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can I add to that, Garrett?
Sure, Robert.
I definitely understand your question, Ern, and like, where does this go? I've used this particular exercise with the corporate. So because I work with corporate on building sustainability systems and indicators and looking at materiality of my business, of a business, right? And so you have to consider the stakeholder. I mean, they say if everyone says we're doing CSR, but you're not doing CSR unless you're really engaging and consulting to understand your stakeholders, right? But that's very scary for a lot of companies. It's like opening the Pandora's box, right? Because if you go and say, oh, we want to know what you think about our company and what we do and what we produce and the impact, then if you don't set the expectation particularly well, then the stakeholder might think you're going to actually act on what I've given you. So of course that's very scary, but it's very important for a company to understand their stakeholders and how they're thinking, that perspective aspect. And so I've used this activity with corporates teams, sustainability teams, because oftentimes they haven't gone to that point where they really sit down with their stakeholders. And so we do this wheel like this, very similar, but in an active workshop to just open up them to try, because it's a role play, it's not perfect, of course, but to try to, as Garrett said, to see the problem from another point of view, just to try to open that window of that mental model and where they're coming from and why they might be thinking this. So, I mean, it's all in the dialogue after, I think, after you go through this kind of brainstorming and this role play, then it's like really like, how do you say, going down into that, the why, like exploring it. Yeah. Exploring what came out of the activity and why. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert. Yeah, this is sort of adopted. This is not intended to be used with SDGs, with the Sustainable Development Goals, but it was just an idea that I had of which might work. And doing it in Miro, I mean, this is basically a fairly ambitious target for this workshop. So I appreciate the challenges that you guys faced in it and recognize that. And thank you for being flexible. Okay, let's quickly go to group two. Group two, can you briefly just summarize what it was that you experienced or came up with and experienced through this exercise?
Who would like to speak with the group? We didn't decide on that thing. Anna, would you? We have two Annas. Would either of the Annas like to? Or Gosha?
Okay. I think first of all, thanks Garrett for bringing us through such an ambitious game. I learned a lot from it. Also, just being I'm new to Miro, so we took our team took some time to really get into the groove of it, and so we were looking at zero hunger, and then we came in to say that to narrow it down would be the inequality of food distribution. Then we took some time actually working and deciding on who are the stakeholders, and do we want to go it at a big picture, or do we want to narrow it down? And thanks Garrett actually for coming into the group to help us at least get along with the process. So and a big thank you to Yen Ma also, who was more proficient in gathering it all and helping us. So I think it was, for me, it was a great learning experience, and I thank the rest of the team. We actually took a lot of time. Just at one point, I think when we had about 5 or 10 minutes left, we were really focusing on just filling in the boxes, and then someone just caught us and said, perhaps we should be having the dialogue, but we didn't have time for it. So I would like to invite the others in my team to really add on to it. Yenma, Tara, Anna, I can't remember the other two names, but thank you so much.
Anybody else, real briefly?
I would like to say that to resonate with what Robert was saying, the exercise here, and I think if we would do this again, we could try it with not worrying about stickies, writing, but each person sits in the role and we have a dialogue about it. And what we take from the insights of that dialogue, because we didn't really get to that part, but it's very interesting to take the headset of that counterparty. So an industrial farmer has profits over people, and the mass consumer, of course, wants to be fed. And the underdeveloped countries would prefer to keep the food in the country that grows it first, and that would also help climate change. So it becomes a very complex conversation. And I think the point is to experience the complexity of that conversation and the power of the mental models that people hold in the process. Yeah.
Well taken. Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you. I agree. If I were to do this again, I would skip the rotations and really allow people to take a deeper dive into that stakeholders' positions and interests and thinking and feelings and have a deeper discussion. So thank you. Okay, let's move on to group 3, and then for the sake of time, group 3. Anybody want to take us briefly in terms of what you came up with as part of this experience?
So I could volunteer, and the rest of you, yeah. If you zoom in a little bit, Garrett.
Sure.
So one of the first learning points for us is when Rabiatul, I think it was you, who said that you can actually turn off, the cursor, the arrow of other people, right? And that just quiet down in all the distraction. Yeah. But I think we were looking at this 3 is about well-being, right? I think where we went into is in the context of COVID, right? The importance of self-care. So we nailed down quite quickly in terms of the problem is how do we encourage personal responsibility for self-care? So I think part of that shifting of the model is rather than how do we help people to increase their well-being, is how do we encourage the self-care? And a couple of stakeholders that we came up with was GP was the first one that came to mind, general practitioner, right? And then come government, ministry, non-profit, businesses, community, schools, and workplace. If I just look at a few, I think in terms of the health ministry, so some of the commentary was from the health ministry perspective, there's a lot of policies, but how do we get that message out to the public more effectively, right? And that's where, that's one aspect. And then the businesses are interesting ones. If you look at businesses, there's two different views. One is, how do businesses look at mental health, differently in terms of how does it correlate with productivity and performance, and therefore, right, play a more active role to kind of enable employees and staff, to have that self-care. But there's also another perspective of businesses or viewed as being very profit-driven. Right? How do we shift that as well, right? And related to that workplace, how do we kind of reinvent the workplace such that it actually enable both physical and mental well-being, right? Yeah, I'm just gonna pause there for others to chip in.
Maybe just to share my experience doing this exercise. It's my first time on Miro. I think for most of us in the team, it's our first time on Miro as well. But despite the confusion and getting to understand this tool, I think most of us jumped pretty quickly into the discussions. And I think I agree with one of the previous sharing by an attendee where for me, the most interesting part about this exercise is the fact that you wear a different hat and you start to appreciate, the challenges or the restrictions that may exist within other stakeholders, which we may not think of, when we are taking this, when we are in the shoe of another stakeholder. So that the complexity of matters, we're just talking about one issue here, and even one issue is that complex. It's that different in terms of challenges and solutions and possible solutions. So I think that was one of the most interesting takeaway from this exercise for me.
Thank you, Roddy. Anyone else from group 3? Looks like you guys did a pretty good job of going through the process actually in the time provided. So thank you, even if it was your first time with Miro. Okay, group 4. Let's go on to group 4. And we're looking here at quality education.
Yeah, Michael said he would represent us.
Sure. So our group talked about quality education, and what we wanted to talk about specifically was about improving the level of critical thinking in Singapore, or at least amongst the Singapore students, because there was a gap that we found to be existing in the way our students are interacting with teachers and also with future employers. So we followed the process, Garrett. So thanks to that process that you have for us about identifying the problem statement, we had that first, and then we went on down to have the stakeholders. So it was a useful guide from you to let us know how to go about this. So the good thing about the group was that we have people from a different perspective, different backgrounds, and I think that added to our views. So we have people who are familiar with the Thailand system, the UK system, the American system, and all this added to the mix as we discuss critical thinking in Singapore. So as you can see from this pie chart, we dealt with the government, the students, the parents, the teachers, and as we were putting down the post-its, and so there were ideas given, and as we were sharing, there were ideas that were piggyback, and it added on to our perspectives, and I think broadened our views. And we got to question some of the assumptions that we were having about how we see critical thinking. So I want to pause here and invite my fellow group members to contribute as they see fit.
Alan, you want to jump in?
I mean, I thought it was a great process, and I don't want to get just divert us into some of the detail that we talked about, but I think that the issue of critical thinking in the way it's taught at school is not just a Singaporean issue. I think it's wider than that, and I mean, this is a massive area that really it surprises me that there hasn't been more movement on education, and that it's still very much traditional subjects taught in discrete subject areas. And I can't remember, I've been on another call this morning and somebody mentioned STEM. I can't remember if it was this call or another call. and STEM subjects, what's been found is that the people who go into the STEM fields are better equipped if they also have an arts and humanities perspective. So literally physicists and engineers who are also poets, I don't want to oversimplify it, but if you get my meaning, who are also poets are actually better physicists and engineers. And so the whole issue of critical thinking and innovation requires a much more of a blending of the different separate topics that we have at the moment. And just one other thing that came up in the conversation that I was really, you know, I hadn't really thought about until our conversation generated this, is that I mean, Singapore's at the high end of people who get really good academic grades. You know, people are drilled through a particular process and they come out at the other end with great paper qualifications. And the irony of all of this is now employers are beginning to recognize that actually what's being produced is not really meeting our needs as employers. Don't get me wrong, I understand education is wider than just preparing people for the workforce, but now employers are moving away from exclusively employing graduates, and it's other criteria they're looking for rather than your university or your university degree classification. So there's some real paradoxes going on in the world of education at the moment.
Well noted. Thank you, Alan. Anyone else, real quickly?
Just want to comment that we have we have 6 stakeholders, and the quality of discussion was great. Like what Alan mentioned, there's a lot of different perspectives, but I think we didn't have enough time for everybody to actually share. So, for example, the international students and students, they didn't even get a chance to. I mean, we didn't even discuss those. We kind of came round into a facilitated session, so everybody just started chiming in, but it didn't incorporate the voices of these 2 groups. So
the students, yeah, nobody really cares what the students think anymore. Good.
The lowest life form.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. Okay, good. So thank you very much. I'm going to switch back over to the slides, recognizing that we are of limited time here, just to kind of wrap some things up here and let you guys go on about your way. We've already discussed all this. And Donna Meadows, just really quick, Meadows, sorry, talks about, or she's come up with her leverage points in the system, and just to recognize that the reason that we're talking about mental models here is because that's where ultimately, if we're trying to create systemic change and find the levers, ultimately it sits within the mindsets and paradigms from which the structure and the goals and the processes and the rules and all this other stuff come out of, right? That per the iceberg model determine the patterns of events and the events themselves. And so how do we access that? And so having discussions around mental models ultimately is really important, because ultimately that's where the real impact of change and transformational change that we need to happen lies. So with that, let me go to one last point before I let you go. I'd also just like to say, please provide any feedback, send any feedback to that Gmail account or to me directly. I'm happy to receive feedback. What I've gotten so far has been absolutely great, so thank you. The next up is the personal mastery session coming up on 3 October. That's going to be also from 11 a.m. to 12:30. There is this QR code. It's going to be led by Tara and Lalit. Tara, do you want to say anything about that really briefly? I'm going to assume not. Okay, so
yeah, we cannot hear.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
We look forward to people joining. We're all prisoners of our own mental models, and that's the lens through which we get to enter personal mastery. So that's why we did mental models first and personal mastery. So
Absolutely.
looking forward to working with everybody. Yeah,
great. Thank you very much, Tara. Please do grab that QR code or go to our website, which will have this set up at some point, if Kenny's willing to help us. And maybe just as you leave, just in the chat, just one descriptive word for your experience with us today. Please don't use any profanity. This is still being recorded. So thank you very much, everybody, for your patience and understanding. This is something that we've just been trying out, so I appreciate it. It's been great having you. Thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. You can send me what you really think privately if you need to.
Okay. Thank you, Garrett.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful
Nice to
time.
meet you all.
Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
And thank you to Peter as well
Yes,
for
thank you.
helping me out.